There is one final step that you may want to take when customizing your room, and that is to adjust the room's preferences. To get to them, we'll select Meeting, Preferences. And some of these preferences have been covered before. For example, the general preference, which allows you to upload a JPEG file into the background of your room to customize it. We've also seen that you can turn these things called host cursors on and off. And what that does is it disables the little ghost-like cursor of the other hosts who might be working in the room. However, there are some other preferences that we'll want to consider, for example, the room's bandwidth. The bandwidth that you allow for the room determines how Connect is going to handle the streams of information that it sends from the server out to your users. If you have the bandwidth set to LAN, that's considered very high bandwidth, and that means that Connect is going to use as little compression as it can, and it's going to keep the frame rate for everything that it does high. So for example, video share or screen share are all things that are going to look nice and high quality and very smooth. However, if you're in a situation where your users are going to be dialed in using cable or DSL, then you'll set this back, because what this will do is it will tell Connect to use a little more compression and perhaps a little bit lower a frame rate. And Connect has a set of algorithms on the back end that it's going to use to make these decisions, which is why we simply choose one of the choices that we have here. Now, if we know that we're in a very low bandwidth situation, for example, a room full of students who are connected via a single wireless waypoint, well, then maybe we'll set the bandwidth to modem. A good general setting to use is DSL cable, because that produces a nice happy medium between quality and bandwidth for a general user set. Audio. In most cases, you'll leave the audio settings as is. However, if you're experiencing issues with voice over IP, you may want to come in and just adjust these settings to see if you can get a better result. For example, if you're hearing a lot of breakup and garbled voices, try the Speaks codec. That may improve things. If you're hearing a lot of echo and a lot of low-quality audio, try deselecting Use Enhanced Audio and see what that does. Most cases, leave it like this, but again, in a troubleshooting situation, this can be helpful for you to adjust things. Video. The video camera is a high bandwidth tool. It uses a lot of bandwidth to give you a high-quality video stream, but you can control it. So for example, if you know that you're in a lower bandwidth situation, maybe you yourself are connected via wireless, you can set this back to give yourself a lower quality video stream. But what Connect is going to do is it's going to use higher compression and drop frame rates to keep everything synchronized, because it's more important for people to see what you're doing in real time than it is for people to see you in high quality but lagging way behind what you're actually saying. A good general setting is standard. But again, you can adjust this up or down based on the situation that you find yourself in. And the same is true of screen share. Screen share is another highly bandwidth-intensive thing to do. And it's important to have high quality if you can afford it, but if your bandwidth is constricted, you may want to set the quality and the frame rate down some. Because again, synchronization is important. You want your audience to see what you're doing in real time as you're doing it. If your settings are too high, then what they're seeing may lag well behind what you're actually doing, and that will create confusion or grumpiness among your audience members. If you're in a very constricted situation, select low. Things won't be smooth, and things will be highly compressed on their screens, but Connect will do its very best in that situation to keep you synchronized with your audience, and that generally is more important than the quality setting. The attendee pod allows you to set a status. For example, you can raise your hand. When you raise your hand, though, it's going to flag the host or presenter that a hand has been raised, and that can become distracting, so you may want to disable that. Now, when you do disable that, your audience may not have any way whatsoever to indicate that they need some help or that they're looking for some information. So if you disable that, know that you've disabled it. Maybe you want to come back in and enable it at another point in the meeting, and you can do so. Now, when someone raises their hand and the host is in a screen share moment, that hand raise can become very distracting there too. So you can actually turn that off so that it doesn't appear when someone is sharing their screen. The raise hand notification only appears when someone isn't sharing their screen. I'm going to go ahead and leave that on because generally speaking, I like to allow my audience to raise their hand to flag me, and I even like to see that when I'm in a screen share moment. The chat pod. We've seen this in a previous lesson for this movie. If you enable private chat for participants, they will be able to chat with each other, and generally speaking, that's an okay thing to do. Now, when you're in a screen share or you're in full screen mode, The chat notification is something that you'll probably want because you'll be able to see that people are asking questions. Now, if you find that distracting, simply disable it, and when people ask questions and you're sharing your screen, you won't know that they've asked them. If you do allow people to do it, it's a good idea to set the notification option to 5 seconds. Someone may ask a question that pops up. If it's only there for 3 seconds, it may not be there long enough for you to read the question and respond to it. And then finally, the Q&A pod. With the Q&A pod, you may want to allow the submitter's name to appear with their question. If you want to anonymize that, simply deselect this. The question appears without a name associated with it. If you want your presenter's name to show with the answer to the question, you can allow that. Or again, if you want anonymity, you can go ahead and turn those off. In most cases, I have no reason to hide those, but if you need to hide them, you can, and here's how you do it. So those are your preferences. You certainly can experiment with them to set your room up the way that you want it to work with respect to notifications and bandwidth usage and the anonymity of questions and answers. It's a good idea to consider this for every meeting that you set up, at least when you set the meeting up for the first time, because you want to make sure that you're in control of these preferences, not the defaults that happen to have come with Connect.